Welcome to the Victorious Living Podcast. You're about to hear real stories of real people who have discovered the real hope of Jesus Christ. I'm Christy Overton Johnson, the founder and publisher of Victorious Living magazine. Since 2011, I've had the privilege of sharing the most amazing life stories. I never cease to be amazed at the life-transforming power of Jesus Christ. Today in our podcast, you're going to go deeper into these amazing God stories and hear from those who have overcome incredible odds and discover how they found a life of freedom. You can discover it too. I trust that you'll enjoy today's conversation between our host and our special guest. Thank you for listening, and be sure to share the hope you hear and the mission of Victorious Living. Welcome back to the Victorious Living Podcast. I'm your host, Brooke, on the mic with Melissa Lott. Melissa, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, I'm so glad to be here. It's been a journey, and I'm just so grateful for the Lord to lead me here.
You too. And for those of you watching and listening right now, however you are digesting this conversation, it's so funny because I like to give a little bit of background on how we ended up here. As you can see, we're on a video call, and a lot of things happen with video calls where we're trying to get inside meetings, we're running behind, and it just sometimes feels chaotic. Just like how life can feel. And so it's always funny. I wonder this too, like when I watch TV or I watch like the Today Show, I'm like, I wonder what happened right before the cameras turned on. Like, are people running late to work? Did they spill coffee on their pants? Like, you just have no idea. And so if you guys are watching and listening to this, Melissa and I have had a funny little chaotic start, but I think that's exactly what is going to tee us up for the best success story, and sharing Melissa's story because she had things happen in her life early on with your childhood and just different things that you've navigated that ultimately people might not know when they look at you or when they hear the success and what God's done in your life. So Melissa, I'd love to share a little bit about just your past and your childhood and things that you've had to weather to ultimately get here today on the Victorious Living Podcast.
That sounds great. I think about what you were saying with that, and here I am, this woman who's not technically savvy. I'm actually quite challenged on some things, and I'm like, oh, great. I hope she's not going to want me to do anything extra because I don't know if I'm going to be able to get in there. And I'm going, where's my children at? They're nowhere around. So anyway, but the Lord made it work out, and here we are.
And here we are, and it worked out.
Yeah. Yeah. So you want me to go ahead and start kind of?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'd like to start with first what I used to do, because I'm retired now. But so I worked in the Department of Corrections for 27 years, and I was a captain when I retired.
Wow.
And it's kind of interesting because this past week, and it just brought to remembrance some of the staff that used to work for me. And one of the key things that was said is somebody else was asking, well, maybe she would like to come back. And they were like, no, she has peace now. She has peace. And I thought, wow, boy, the Lord has done some major work, and sometimes we don't realize how much we don't have peace, how hurting we are, and how we affect others until we're out. And the Lord has done this great work. And then we see what other people see, that only the Lord could have done that.
Yeah.
And so I want to start off with that part because the people from Victorious Living, when they read this, some of them are going to know me. Some of them are going to know the old me. Some of them are going to know the old me and the new created me that the Lord has done. And then there's some that's going to have met me for the first time in my created, what the Lord has done.
Right.
But some of them still, I know they still see other parts that you can't unforget, some things you can't unsee, or some things that press upon. And so I always think, okay, well, Lord, this is your story. Whatever you have done with this is yours, and you need to be given the glory for that. So working in the department, I wasn't anything nice. I wasn't anything that I was very there was nothing there. It didn't start out that way. My childhood started out with me with the Lord calling me at a very early age when I was 6, and I remember going to the altar, pulling away from my mother, being disobedient, and giving my heart to the Lord when I felt His hand, and of course I got a spanking. I mean, I got disciplined that night, and me asking the Lord, I don't understand. I mean, I got saved, and this is what my parents had been wanting me to do, but it was the not understanding the disobedience. And then life really started happening. My mother had mental illness issues, left alone a lot. Abuse came in forms of, mental, physical, and sexual, and all the things. And so by the time that I graduated from high school, which I was living with people by that time, and when you're in those environments, you have to accept what you're handed out because you're living off of somebody else,
Yeah.
in a sense. So, and the enemy has a way of marking you in those areas and in those things. And so, um, there's a lot of where the enemy tried to take me out, which created this monster. And the Department of Corrections was my vindication per se. Nobody was going to control me. I could see the game a mile away because I should have been wearing blue. A lot of things I didn't get caught at,
Mm.
and a lot of things that the Lord moved me out of the way. And as when He called me in this later date, and I just submitted everything to Him, He started showing me all of the areas that He had His hand on me, and all of the areas on how things could have just went totally the opposite way. So that also made me very good at my job because I should have been wearing blue. I had a very mindset in that respect, so I could see things and have a discernment. And sometimes I would say, that's the reason why you got caught, because I wouldn't have done it that way.
Right.
you know
Right.
I mean, you're not thinking this out, through.
Yeah. You're not.
So
Yeah.
right. So in all that stuff, a lot of damage. And we think we're doing the best. We think we're being righteous. We think we're being doing what's right, and we don't realize that without the Lord, none of that is.
Right.
And without grace, there's nothing.
Yeah. It
There's
just
nothing.
works at that point. It's literally just
Right.
checking a box instead of living in like freedom and grace and relationship with Him because He
Right.
loves us. Like when you're doing things out of self-protection, or you're trying to cover something
Right.
up, or you're trying to let your good outweigh your bad, it's all in
Right.
vain because it's not
Right.
actually going to equate to anything. Like it's a formula that doesn't exist, like for that.
Right. And I didn't understand grace. I could go to church. I could go home, never swear, never tell a dirty joke, make sure my family grew up in a way that I didn't grow up, and go to work and be a total different monster. And not understand what it meant to have a relationship with Lord. I had religion, and I could, but I had no relationship. And it did but the grace of God, truly the grace of God, He continues to sow seeds in us, knowing when that time comes, that field will bloom. And I can remember when He finally, and some people hear Him, some people, but there was just an audible voice. And it was not anything that you could describe as being, it was like thunder just speaking through. And if you don't get out, if you don't choose, you will lose everything. And and I was on the compound when it happened, and I had to really, okay, what does this mean? What does this look like? And the Lord had been calling me and calling me. And I said, all right, I can't do this. I can't have one foot in the world and one foot out. And I retired, and boy, I was for a roller coaster ride then. And it's been beautiful. It's been painful. It
Yeah.
has been painful, and I've had to do some hard work, but man, the rewards have been fabulous.
Yeah. And that's how it is. Like when we think of reaping what we sow, it's like God was
Yes.
protecting you from sowing bad seeds.
Right.
And he
Right.
was like, "Perfect. Let's do a little U-turn." In his kindness, he was firm with you because you needed that in that moment. But it's because his heart towards you is so loving, because he wants good things for you. He wants you, to reap joy, to reap wisdom, to reap peace, to reap all of these things in your life. And it's the same thing that we would do with our kids. Like if our kids are headed towards destruction,
Yeah.
you're like, grab him by
Yeah.
that collar. I love you
Yep.
too much. I
Yep.
love you way too much for you to go down that road. And so I think the other thing too with the prison ministry, with Victorious Living, and through and through about prison, but it's this idea, like, I think that people are under, that prison is, I look at it, for lack of better words, as like a mercy of God, that it was like,
Yes.
hey, I'm putting you in here, and you have a decision now to make. Do you want to live your life to honor me, or do you want to, be separate from me? So what a kindness of God to, shelter, us from our decisions. Obviously, there are consequences to our actions, but the punishment of our sins on him. And he took that for us, and he wants to give all of us access to that grace,
Yes.
to
Yes.
that redemption, to that holiness, to all of the goodness that he has for us. It literally says, like, in scripture, like, we are co-heirs with Christ. Like, being an heir is a pretty big deal. The benefits that we get from being an heir of God is absolutely nuts. And so I love that, and I don't mean to steal your thunder, but I just wanted to touch on that I love that it was very much like a huge redirection of, hey, you were headed towards things that you could have lost it all. And in his goodness, he told you that so that you could change.
And I lost enough inside
Right.
doing what I thought was right because I wasn't listening to him.
Right.
And the beauty of that is if you and Brooke, and that's the thing is about what we are doing, what we are co-laboring for is his glory.
Right.
It's none of, when you thunder, no, that this is his story, honey. This, I'm telling you, when I got out, if you would have ever, even when I got out, if he'd have said, well, I'm going to send you back in, I'm like, no, 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 I did my time. I did life plus two. Nope. But you know what? The great thing about the Lord is he will take our crushing, he will take our brokenness, and he will make that beautiful, sweet wine that he always does to pour out on others to feed them.
Mhm.
And I can remember when, we say a lot of things to the Lord, like, I'll do what you want me to do, whatever you want me to do. He's like, okay. And I can remember the first time that he, like, it really tested me. Like, are you going to mean what you say? Are you really going to be different? Are you really going to have that new creation? And there was a lady who had gotten out, and she had served time with me, but she was inside, and I was the captain, and it was probably maybe her second day out. And when she saw me, the glory of God, he opened my eyes up for me to see her. And when she saw me, she bristled up. Not only bristled up, her whole body language changed, and she shut down completely. And she was waiting for that old person, and she was waiting for the rejection. She was waiting for all the things that would have come from that old person. And the Lord then asked me, okay, what are you going to do?
Wow.
What are you going to do? And because we don't, and I had my best friend with me at the time, and she was still employed with the Department of Corrections. And of course, she automatically stiffened up, she remembered the lady. And all right, Lord, I went over there and I hugged her
Wow.
and we cried. And it was that, but that was the breaking. That was the beginning of, all right, you're asking, and I will deliver, and I will take it all from you.
Yeah.
And I will give you all the things that I have for you, love and mercy and grace. And it's just it's just
So
beautiful
beautiful.
what he can
And you
do.
know what? You did nothing to earn it.
Not a single thing.
Not a single thing. There wasn't one thing you did. Like you
Nope.
wake up 4 days before going, I'm going to practice being loving. I'm going to practice being loving. I'm going to practice being loving. God's
Nope.
love through you did it.
Yep.
And that's the beauty, right? And I think that's like where people can be confused of like, oh, so I just don't have to do anything. And it's like, I mean, I hate to say it, but not really. You got to give your life to him and he'll take control for sure. But he does it's through him we do things. It's through his spirit that he allows us, he prompts us. Obviously, we have a reaction. We have to, listen and we need to be available. But as far as like you being filled with love and mercy for somebody,
No, not one bit.
there you
But
couldn't.
he chose, he gave me a choice though.
Yeah.
That's the other thing about Brooke is that he says he gives us a choice. You know, it's not that he is that gentle master who knocks on our heart's door. He doesn't bang, he's not ringing the
His
doorbell
way in, he
incessantly.
doesn't barge. Yeah.
Right. He's like, okay, if this is what you want, okay, are you going to make a choice? Here's your choice. It's one or the other. And when you choose him
Mm.
over yourself, he just, all right, yes, you're teachable. Yes, I can, oh, wait until I have things for you. And I just, and the things that I can, when I talk to these ladies that are inside and I meet them where they're at without condemnation,
Oh yeah.
with understanding that God's love, and we can't love ourselves or our enemy until we learn how to love him and seek him first and let him fill us with that.
Love
But
us.
getting them to see that and they know that it's authentic and they know you know, when because I try to tell them I'm not a church lady. I tried to be that. I don't know what the Lord was like. I didn't make you to be a church lady. What made you think you were a church lady? There's way too much scars. There's way too much blood on your hands. There's way too much stuff. So I made you to war. You just haven't been doing that for me.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's the beauty. Yeah.
It is. It's so funny. There's a couple of things that really struck me so far in our conversation, and what's making me teary-eyed every time is how much we, when we're in our suffering or we're in our confusion or we're in our darkness, that we go, this is absolutely horrible. I can't see any good coming from this. And if we all had a fast forward button, I know we wish we all had that. But the biggest thing that brings humility in my life, one of the biggest things, is looking back going, how did God use that? How
Yep.
in the world did he use my like sickness or my mental issues or my anger? Like, how in the world am I standing on this side of something seeing beauty? Like, it blows my mind because, I walked through hell on earth in my mind for a couple of years and I thought I was never going to be the same again. Like, I was like, I've lost my mind. I can't find it. You've been in therapy, I've done medicine, like all the things, right? I was like, what's going on? And I know that I'm not the only person that's listening or here that has ever felt like that, where they felt like nothing good's going to come out of their life anymore because obviously God's just dropped the ball, right? We can convince ourselves, and the enemy, with the enemy's help, we can convince ourselves of
Yep.
anything. And I'm sitting on the other side of it now, just being like, in my own life, just like, how did you do that? Like, because there was nothing I did that could have reaped this amount of joy, reaped this amount of healing, reaped this amount of goodness in my life. Like, it is the most humbling thing to watch the Lord do something you thought would never happen for you. And I know that this magazine, Victorious Living Magazine, and this podcast, and I mean, your story, hundreds of other stories, people who are listening story, there's probably a time in our life where we could all go, he used that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like you said, you're like, I'm not a church girl. Like, God put me in, like, he put me like I'm in the trenches, right? That is,
Right.
what is my, every just new update is like thumbs up. But anyways, God has has put you in a place that only you could go because of how he designed you and how his how your story has been pruned and processed. Like your testimony, not that it's better than mine or anybody else's, but your testimony is being used exactly where God knew it was going to be used.
Yes, yes. And Brooke, when I hear you speak that, and it always he presses upon me, there is no pain and no suffering that we go through, because it's a honing process, it's a purification process that he won't use to be able to reach others that are burning in the fire. And if you want to get down there and get dirty and start bringing people out of the fire, saying, there is so much deliverance, there is so much healing, come to the well, my friend. I know where you're at. I've seen it. I'm telling you. And then you start speaking life into them, and they're like, you've been there. I have been there. And there is a deliverance. And the other day too, one of the ladies came to my class, and she said, one of the officers in there was telling me, and I was coming to your class, and I told him I was coming to your class, and he said, if the Lord can change her, he can change anybody. I can tell you right now. The Lord can change. And I think to myself, back when I first stepped back into the prison, I'm like, what are they going to think? What are they going to see? Are they truly going to see his light and what he has done in me? Or are
Yeah.
they going to think it's a facade? And of course, even during that time, he was honing my mind. He was changing my thought process, reminding me that I am his, and it doesn't matter what anybody thinks, that if I am serving him, they will always see him in that.
Yeah, it's so beautiful. And the other thing too is, with your story and something I've just been thinking about as we've been talking, and just kind of what I feel like God's been doing in my own life and showing me is, you know, we can see the goodness of God and the fruit and deliverance on this side of heaven. And I think sometimes, and I know we have the hope of heaven and it's way grander and bigger than here on earth. And I'm not trying to teach a prosperity gospel by any means, but I just like, I never want people to think that, well, I'll find my true freedom. Oh, well, we will, but like the only freedom I'm ever going to have when I die and go to heaven, because I believe we'll see the goodness of God in the land of the living. I believe that he has good things for us here. I believe that our world has been distorted by sin and brokenness and cancer and death and suicide and abuse and hate,
Yes, yes,
hate
yes,
things. But it's also full of life. It's full of laughter,
yes,
full of
yes,
joy. It's full of goodness. It's full of forgiveness. It's full of
yes,
true happiness. It's full
yeah,
of success. It's full of dreams being realized. It's full of
yes.
businesses being birthed. It's full of marriages being restored. It's full of that. And I never want anyone thinking that when they listen to any podcast or anything that I'm involved in specifically, but especially our ministry of victorious living, that only victory is over there. Um, because I know that there's probably a lot of despair when you're in a jail cell or in a prison cell, but I also know that there's a lot of people outside now that have been restored tenfold, not because of anything they did good, right? A lot of times people get
Right.
out on good behavior. I get that as far as the world's concerned, but when it comes to the Lord giving us good gifts, it's because of his goodness. It's because he loves us. It's because he wants,
Right.
because what we're going through here is a shadow of what's to come. Is it the full experience? No, but it is a shadow, and we get glimpses every single day. That sun coming up, beautiful.
You
That.
know, it's funny, Brooke, is I'll tell this story. I told this to Christy. So the Lord is always for preparation and detail. Okay. And the law of the land is you will reap what you sow.
Mhm.
If you sow nothing, you will have nothing. If you sow bad, you will reap bad. And if you sow good. So when I retired, I went to a couple different jobs. I worked in the department for so long. Trying to cut those ties was very difficult because I was institutionalized.
Mhm.
Okay. So I was working at a work release program. And part of the thing with work release was getting the Lord inside that men's work release, which is outside of Gainesville, or it's in Gainesville. And that was the first time I knew about Victorious Living magazine. And we would get subscriptions and I would put them out. And I'm just saying, and I would, I had always had religion, and they would use them for all kinds of stuff, and
Right.
it didn't matter. It just, and I would take the box or whatever that I got, and I would put them out, and I would put them out, and never dawning that at this moment at the time I'm having a podcast with Miss Brooke for Victorious Living.
Yeah.
Never. And the way that he plans and the way that he prepares, and when we just give him our yes, that's all he asks for. When he gives us his choices, are you willing to serve me?
Yeah.
Are you willing to do what I ask you to do? Yes, Lord, whatever that means. And then here, and I thought about that. Me and Christy were talking, and I was like, first time I met her, first time talk, and I was like, back 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I'm handing out Victoria's Living magazines. Had no clue,
No clue.
no clue,
Well, it's
no
funny you
clue.
said Gainesville because that's how I got connected to Victorious Living podcast. I went to the University of Florida, go Gators. And I think in 2016 or 17, my teacher who was connected to Christy asked if our class, because I was in journalism school, would write an article for a magazine. And I did. Didn't really hear anything from it. And so that was what, 2016, I think. And then in 2020, I got an email from Victorious Living saying, "Hey, we found an article you wrote, like a submission you wrote 4 years ago. Can we put it in our magazine?" And at that point, I'd already had my own podcast. And so after they published it, they're like, "Do you want to host ours?" And I was like, "I'd be honored." And I just would
Oh
have
my
never thought,
gosh.
because I just went to class one day and my teacher asked there was a small class because we were in, it was like a very, like, you know how you can pick a bunch of different electives.
Yeah,
I
yes,
picked this
yes.
one that barely anybody was taking, but I wanted to be in it because it was writing, it was camera work, we did
Right.
weather, like it was all of these different things that I was interested in. And my teacher just so happened to be a believer and was connected with Christy. And so we just all wrote one. And I don't know if anybody else's got published. I should look into that. But it was crazy that 4 years later, I'd never thought twice about submitting that
Yep,
living.
I
And
know.
it's just cool because it goes back to what we're saying of we can't plan, we can't earn, we can't calculate and figure it out. He does what he does, and it's a very humbling because then you experience it, and before you know it, you're crying, going,
Yep,
I couldn't
yep,
even thought of that. I wouldn't have.
yep.
I'm not smart
No.
enough, like at all, to like have ever put those pieces together. And so it's just wild to be sitting here. I think I've choked up more times than I have on a podcast because there's just a lot that you've even said, my own personal, like that has hit me where I'm just like, he is so good. And I love that he's restored your story and that it's not perfect. And it's been messy, you know?
Messy. But I think also too, there is such a disconnect between corrections and staff and the people that they have authority over. And when I first went in, I don't know. I grew up in a Southern Baptist church, kind of like spiritual warfare and all them gifts are kind of stuck together in that Bible.
Yeah.
And so here he is opening. I'd been around it and didn't even know it, and he's showing me that there needs to be a connection with correctional staff that are in authority over the broken over and a lot of your correctional staff are broken as well. I was very broken and had no clue I was broken, and how and why I reacted to the way that I did about things, and the way that I looked at things, and how I could be so disconnected from things. And it was over, learning how to survive in a time prior to the Department of Corrections. And then so I see that with these ladies. The Lord shows I get to be that vessel that the Lord says, I want to show you the way I see them.
Mm.
I want to show you their brokenness. I want to show you why they look at things this way, and what this looks like. And maybe you can just impart in them something that makes them a seed, that makes them turn to me Because none of this is it's not about any of us. It's about the cross. It's always about the cross. And when we ever forget that about denying ourselves and carrying our cross and what that looks like for him, we've lost the message.
Yep.
And it's about lending our hand down to the broken and picking them up,
Mm.
and when you have authority in places, you also have a responsibility to his broken, no matter what they've done, why they've done it, whatever that looks like. And that's where he taught me grace, truly taught me what grace looked like.
Yeah, I love that, and God has the ultimate authority, and he's
Yes,
given
yes,
authority to his son Jesus. And you know how, and this makes me tear up thinking about it, but the way Jesus demonstrated his authority, it was through
yes,
serving us.
yes,
He
yes,
made the least of these
yes,
hang naked on a tree because of the joy set before him, which was us.
yes,
And we have that, authority and responsibility as well as his kids, and as co-heirs with Christ, and as his sons and daughters, and he has bought us with a price. And we can't even pay him back. Like, there's just no way, right? And all he's asking is for our life and our hearts. And it's a beautiful exchange, because when he asks for us, it's not so that he can be our puppet master. It's so that he can
no,
healing to us, that he can open the eyes of the blind, so that he can set the prisoner free, so that he can
yes,
heal
yes,
heal us and
yes,
make us whole, because wholeness is ultimately how he designed us. And it was severed when sin entered into the world. And this plan of redemption is not a mystery. It's not a 4-step, 5-step program. It's not a carrot on a stick, and it's not a treasure hunt of success to get to him. It's not a treasure hunt of religion. It's not a moral code that we live by. Like, moral improvement without Jesus is absolutely nothing. And so
It's our freedom though, Brooke. It's our freedom. I mean,
yeah,
that's what when he asks us for our life, and it's huge when people hear that. I can't do that. He doesn't ask, he asks for one step at a time. Do you trust me? Will you trust me with this little thing? And the next thing you know, you end up looking at, like, I have given you all of my life, not my good, my bad and my ugly. And what I think is good, yeah, okay. All right, yeah, all right. And then he's turned it into his glory. And it's phenomenal. And we look back and we like, my lands, that sacrifice that I thought was going to be so, so awful. So I can't do that. I won't choose him because it's too much. We realize then it only just took that one, it just only took that one choice that he gave me. Are you willing to put your money where your mouth is? Are you willing to, what you asked me for? Are you willing to do that? And when I did that with that young lady, and I have a relationship with that young lady, she broke me. He used her to break me to understanding grace.
yep.
And I have never looked back since. Never, and I will not. And that's the one thing that he tells me. I made you to war for me, which means I'll war for him, and he knows that I will not stop until he calls me home.
And
There is
the flip side of that beauty is he wars for you.
Yes, yes,
He
yes. I mean, he prepares the way. When I say war, I'm talking about this nothing like it was back. I mean, I'm
Yeah,
talking
yeah,
about this
no, but
praying,
it's
it's singing, it's praising the Lord, it is having a smile on my face, it's having pure joy and freedom. Freedom that I want that. People say, I want that. I want to see what's on Brooke's face. You see what's in the light that's in Brooke's face and her heart, and when she speaks, the life that comes out of her. I want that. That's the warring he does with us.
it's true. And it's so, like, he does more than we could ask, think, or
Yeah,
imagine. It is
yeah,
truly true. It is.
yes,
I'm living proof of that. I know you're living proof of that. I know that we overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony.
yes,
And our testimony
yes,
is tried and true because of him. and because he's disciplined, because he's faithful, because he's loyal, because he's kind,
Yes.
he's
Yes.
merciful, he's all of those things. And
Yes.
in our brokenness, he goes, let me give that to you. And it's
Yes.
like so radical, it's so undeserved, it's so beautiful. And that's what hopefully those that are listening and watching are seeing in Melissa and I going, what is that? Because we can tell you it's not us. Because if it
Not
were
one bit.
me, it would be like if I was the one doing it, I'd be boasting about it because, but we can't, because I can't point to anything in my life that's good and rich and lavish on my life and go, that was because I got it right. Or
So I will tell this one last story. This cracks me up,
yes.
and it just so one of the ladies in prison, who's still in there, and she knew me from back in the day. So the Lord was dealing with me on, are you going to continue to align yourself with with what you think of yourself, with the shame and the guilt of what you were like inside? And that takes a while, and that's where sometimes we need to have grace with people and understand that you must choose what the Lord says about you as a new creation versus what the enemy continues to bring up. And so we're in there, and I'm in the pool to baptize the ladies, and she goes, and her name is Sam McCormick, and she goes, she calls me Cap. She's Cap. Never thought in this day that you'd be putting them in the water as many times I've seen you put them on the ground. And the whole place got real quiet. And it was another test, like the Lord says, what are you going to come in alignment with? I mean, it was just that quickly. And I looked at Sam, and I said, and I gave her a high five. I said, me neither, Sam. This is just God's story right here. And the whole place erupted in laughter and smile. And I was like, man, what a blessing. He rewards us when we're faithful to him as well.
Yep.
And just that moment, I could have taken it all different directions, but I knew he was showing me, my good and faithful servant.
Yeah, he was. And he's
And
proud of you.
yes, and say, and just to say that that's, and this woman, now listen to this thing, she has changed, we both changed, and to see the change and know that it is genuine, and I was listening to Vito podcast the other day, and it was a fabulous story. And the one lady who was on there, I can't remember what it is, I can't remember names half the time, but anyway, she was on there, she was fabulous, but she was talking about jailhouse religion, and she said, let them have the jailhouse religion. Anything that we can sow seeds on, anything that brings them to the cross, it never becomes void. The Lord will use that somewhere down the line, somewhere. And I just think about, I'm a walking testimony. It may have taken me 50 some odd years to get all the seeds that he's sown in me. But now the harvest, man, and he lets me to come out there, and he lets me, I get to, for him, get
Right?
in that field and frolic and be free and set the captives free. Like, Lord, this captive, what can I help with this captive? Can I? Yeah, that's him. He does that.
And he does. And, I think of, that funny story that you just shared, but like how beautiful it is that again, you had a decision to make to
Yeah,
identify with who you used to be or who you are now. And,
right.
been given access to things you never thought you'd have access to, as in baptizing people and just beauty. And, I think of that in my life, and God's brought me into, different heights and different places. And, I struggle sometimes, like we all do up here, to resorting back to who I used to be, or how my old thought patterns, right? Of, oh, Brooke is just this, or, Melissa's just this, right? And I love that that God is so faithful to remind us, no, that's not who I say you are. First of all, it's never who I said you were. But now I'm
Right.
showing you who you are in me, and I'm restoring your view of yourself, because he's always seen you as Melissa,
Right.
child of
Yes.
God, his daughter. He
Yes.
saw you
Yes.
baptizing these women in the pool when you were 4. He knew that you'd do
Yes.
that.
Yes.
And
Yes.
he is so faithful to bring us to where he sees us. And I think, again, it's making me teary-eyed just to think about how when he gives us a new season, and a victorious one at that. And like, how did
Yes.
you bring this about in my life? I want to see myself the way God has always seen me, which
Yeah.
is a royal priesthood, chosen, lovely, his girl, proud, like he's proud of me, apple of his eye. Like, that is who we are as his kids. And for those of you listening or watching right now that are struggling with identity, and all of us do, but you've made decisions out of a false identity, or you've committed
Yes.
sin or a crime or murdered somebody or touched a little kid and done all of these horrible things that are sinful and not holy and deserve a consequence, you know, at the end of the day, you made that decision out of a lie you believed about yourself, and a lie you believed about God, and a lie you believed about somebody else from the father of lies. And Jesus is so faithful to step into those places and see our filth and see our disgust and just scoop us up
Yes.
and love us and whisper hope and give us things that we don't deserve out of his great love for us. And he wants to lavish that on every single person in this world that's ever walked this world. And that's hard for us to believe because we all have hierarchies in our mind of sin and grace and where our love will go, where our forgiveness will go. But
Can
his,
I take it back on that?
please.
Because everybody raves about the shack and the book and the movie, and it's good. It's a good perspective. I got about 2 chapters in, and I wasn't ready to finish the rest of it. Okay. But it's the Lord and the way that he does things. So I'm retired, but I'm taking inmates out on a work crew I work for a public county crew. Okay. So I go pick them up and I bring them out. And I had one come to me and talk to me about somebody that was in there that had held her granddaughter down to be sexually abused for drugs, and what I thought about that and forgiveness.
Mm.
And I shut down, and I just because that old flesh was coming up as far as judgment, and I just said, I need to think on that one. And I was leaving for a cruise, went on a cruise, and guess what was on the only thing that was on the TV was the shack. And I got to see the 15 minutes of when they were in the cave. When the gentleman was being shown when he thought he was God, and God was showing him this man and what had happened to him when he was a little child, and what he was going to be able to do with this story. And that's the Lord started talking to me. Regardless of whatever happened with this child, I'm going to be able to turn that into my good. I'm going to be able to do that. And that's where forgiveness and grace comes from. And it really showed me that. And then I was able to relay that to the lady who'd come up and talk to me about it. And I had to give a little scenario. I said, we've got this one over here picking up cigarettes for the one that's making her pick up the cigarettes to pay off her debt, because this is what happens in prison. And I said, and what's the difference? They're still selling their soul. Just what is the difference between one or the other? The Lord's going to be able to take that story of that child and what happened to her and turn it around. But we don't know what's going to happen with this right here. They're going to continue to sell their soul. What's the difference? And it really made me think about sin and why there is not degrees in sin. It's being out of the will of God. It's being out of his freedom and his shelter. And he just showed me a different look of looking at his creation and what he can do with that. And it's not about us, and it's not about us to be able to judge those things.
It's not, and thank God, because I don't want that.
Yes. Oh, I don't want responsibility.
No,
You are
no,
absolutely
thank you.
correct on that one.
No,
Yep. Nope.
I'm good. Um, well, excuse me. At the end of each show, I love to ask each guest what one of their favorite qualities about God is. I know there's a lot, but something that you feel like you've seen a side of him that you cling to.
His consistent faithfulness to us, not for anything that we have done, not that but because of his love for us, his continual faithfulness because he loves us.
Mhm.
I think that is my favorite quality of his, because no matter what day it is, no matter if I get it wrong, he's still there. He's still faithful to minister to me. He's still faithful to carry me. He's still faithful to walk with me and talk with me and tell me I'm his own. He's still faithful to show me his word that reads me at the time that I need it to minister to me in all areas. He's still faithful. When I get it wrong, he's still faithful.
I love it. He's faithful when we're faithless. And that's
Yes.
God
Yes.
we serve. Melissa, thank you so much for joining us on the Victorious
You're
Living
welcome, bro.
today.
All right. All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching our broadcast. Are you an incarcerated brother or sister who needs encouragement? Write to us at Victorious Living Correspondence, P.O. Box 2751, Greenville, North Carolina 27836, or email us at hope@vlmag.org. To view Victorious Living magazine in its entirety, please have your chaplain contact us at 352-478-2098 or email us through our website at vlmag.org. We are happy to provide our Victorious Living magazine free of charge in bulk with or without staples.